Captain Picard. Priority 1 message from Starfleet coming in on secured channel.
My Readier Room.
Hello, and welcome to the Readier Room, the only, and as of now, longest-running Star Trek The Next Generation rewatch podcast. Ours is also the only one with on-the-set stories and real-life Trek history that you've never heard before. My name is Mitchell Mells, Chief Consultant of Services at Paramount, and with me, as always, is my life partner, Brandon Hobbs. Brandon, how are we today?
Mitch, you ugly bag of mostly water.
You know, I get that
great.
a lot. I get that a lot.
Really great that we are now the longest running Star Trek podcast. That's quite a milestone, isn't it?
It's really amazing. Because I noticed when I was exploring the Twitter sphere, I'd go to find some friends, podcast friends to follow and be followed by, and I would click on a podcast and be like, "Oh, episode 10, 2 years ago." Episode 13, 6 months ago, you know, like they would just never really be that long running. And now, in my light research, I've yet to find another TNG focused podcast that had as many episodes as we did with the addition of this week's one. Which I
and you know, it's baffling. It's baffling because it is not that difficult, I've found, to be wildly successful at podcasts.
Not at all.
You know?
It's pretty easy when you think about it, and there's no clearer evidence for that than our own success. So
right, of course.
I have to think that anybody who's not experiencing and enjoying this level of success just really is not trying at all.
At all,
whatsoever.
Yeah.
So we're in our own sphere. We're in our own stratosphere. The Readier Room. It's us and the other guys, basically. And,
right. And, you know, we are, as we found, we are the ones that the fans come to for this kind of content. And yeah, we always will be. So
right.
I'm actually thinking if anyone had any plans to make a podcast to rival ours, they might as well not even try.
Right. It's no use. They should just give up.
Yeah.
But part of the reason that fans come to us is, our insights, our stories, and the fact that we're able to answer their questions, which brings us to our question of the week, as always. And this week's question comes from Phil. And Phil asks, what exactly is a tricorder? Which is, a prop that the characters on the show often use. And
of course,
that's like a really oddly insightful question to ask. Really shows that Phil's paying attention, because the tricorders, they do a variety of things, really just anything that the characters need them to do. If they need to scan the atmosphere, if they need to get readings of something, if they need to be a communication device, like whatever, they can do it all. That was not the initial vision for the tricorders. The first plan was to have the tricorders kind of be a piece of outdated technology in the world of Star Trek. Like the characters would start using their tricorders and be like, oh man, this hunk of junk can't do what I want it to do. And this would eventually set up the introduction of the quadcorder in season 4. And the idea is that the quadcorder would be such a leap forward from the tricorder that all the characters would be, giving a lot of lip service to them. Like, oh, these amazing quadcorders, they're so efficient and I can use them really easily. They're so great. But really early on, there was a lot of plot holes and painting ourselves into a corner where we needed some kind of almost magical device to explain away the problem of the scene, and that always fell to the tricorder. And at that point, it'd be impossible to sell it as a device that wasn't really effective. So that idea got scrapped.
And it's unfortunate too, because we ran into a bit of an ET situation. Alan had already made countless numbers of quadcorders.
Right, because everyone would have their own.
Exactly. Yes, that was one thing that Gene was very adamant about. Is that true to how life would actually be in the Star Trek universe, every ensign has his own quadcorder,
Right.
right? So we ended up having to just dump them in a landfill somewhere. When they're probably still there. So any fans listening to this,
Well, it was all
you know,
plastic, so it's not like it's gonna, return to the Earth. Certainly
yeah,
not.
yeah. So
But
there are these quadcorders out there somewhere, and I bet they'd fetch a pretty penny.
I wonder if any of the fan merchandise got made, like the things we're gonna sell. There was a big marketing push in the works where it's like Johnny, get your gun, Ensign, get your quadcorder. It was gonna be on like T-shirts and mugs and stuff. Catchphrases were really big in television at the time, and we had been looking forward to integrating some into TNG, like that the characters could say. And sometimes you plan for it and it works, and sometimes something accidentally becomes a bit of a catchphrase, like Picard's tea order was something that fans really latched onto, but we didn't really have any initial ideas of that being at all significant.
Yeah, and it really makes you realize exactly what kind of people your fans are.
Right.
You see that happen.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. And even more so to the point, now that we've told this story, I know once conventions start opening up, we're going to go to them and we're going to hear a lot of Ensign, get your quadcorder. Just people parroting something as soon as they hear it. And
right. I mean, that is what makes you a bigger fan than the next guy, right?
Right.
Your knowledge of these things.
Right. And your ability to flaunt and exhibit that knowledge openly.
Well, I mean, to be fair, Mitch, yeah, there is a bit of a skill knowing when to bring that kind of stuff out, knowing what to bring out at what time, right? So
True. So I will give a special prize to any ensign out there who gives me the most apropos usage of Ensign, get your quadcorder at the next Star Trek convention that we both attend.
There we go.
Yeah.
There we go.
So
yeah. Well, actually, we'll send you something nice, some merch or something, maybe.
Something exclusive.
Yeah. Yeah, something exclusive. Yeah.
Yeah, nothing you can just go and buy anywhere. But that's something for all you little ensigns out there. Be looking forward to it.
So tweet at us, email us, whatever.
Yeah, and same thing with asking any questions. If you're like Phil and you have a very, very insightful question you want to have answered on the podcast, you can tweet at us or you can email to us at the Readier Room at gmail.com with capital T, capital R, and a second capital R. And we'll get your email, read it, and potentially respond to it. Just how these things tend to go.
Potentially,
yes. And I can't make any promises. God knows. But anyway, that's our question of the week. Thank you very much, Phil. And that's going to take us to today's episode, the main topic of discussion, which I think is an episode that while I was watching it, I was like, oh, I am looking forward to talking about this one. I think it's got a lot going on in some ways. So the name of this episode is Home Soil, and it's ostensibly for maybe half of it, it's like it starts as a murder mystery plot on a isolated space station, essentially. Not quite a space station, but whatever. And then it evolves into this kind of first contact story.
Yeah, right.
And I liked both halves of that whole, but I think either of them, or rather both of them, would have been better just stretched to a full-length episode.
Yeah, I'm inclined to agree with that. I think both of them had a good foundation, but like so many other episodes in season 1 of this show, the execution is not great.
Right. So we can talk about both halves of this, but we might as well start with the murder mystery one, given that happens first.
Yeah.
Really cool concept for a murder mystery plot in a sci-fi setting.
Yeah, absolutely.
So there's a man's killed by like a laser cutting tool,
a mining laser. Yeah.
And the question is like, okay, well, how did this happen? Was it malfunction? Was it programmed to do this? Was it being controlled?
Right.
Which is kind of like that full integration of sci-fi into the murder mystery thing. It's not just finding a dead body and trying to think of the killer. It's like, well, what are even the circumstances that could lead to somebody dying in a situation like this? It's got an added layer of complexity.
Exactly. See, like it could be someone controlling it from another room. It could be programmed. It could be any number of things. It was hacked from another planet or something. Cool stuff. You're right.
It's even kind of set up because there's this moment where like one character talks to another. He's like, "Oh, you should go to the laser room, whatever it is, right now."
Yeah.
And the guy's like, "Really? You think so?" And his boss is like, "Yeah, go." And which is, suspicious. Doesn't end up mattering. Doesn't end up figuring in anything. Kind of a red herring.
I guess it was meant to be a red herring, and I don't think it's necessarily bad that our expectations were subverted here, and it became a different kind of episode. But I do agree the setup was just so good that it made me kind of just want it to continue being murder mystery.
Right, and
and it's so much better than Picard going into the holodeck and solving a murder mystery or whatever,
Right, it is infinitely more interesting than that. And part of that is that setup where your mind, having seen murder mysteries, across all sorts of media, you're like, all right, I'm starting to put together clues and looking at these characters and thinking about their motivations. Because, of course, there's the boss who sends the one guy to the place where he dies. There's also another worker there who, when he meets Data, he's like completely taken by him. And he's like, oh my god, an android? An artificial life form? And, he's kind of like notably fixated on it to the point where when they introduce this inorganic life form later on, I'm like, maybe because that guy was really interested in Data being another kind of inorganic life form. Maybe he's got some kind of connection to this, and that's going to end up mattering. No, of course not.
Yeah. It's you're right, and we'll get into that when we discuss the second half. I think it would probably be better. But I do want to talk about the set. But before that, did you notice when they bring up what's his name, Mandel?
He's the dead one, right?
No. He's
the old
Walter. Yeah.
Okay, Walter.
Did you notice when they have him up on the view screen and he and Picard and Troy are talking to him? Picard just closes the channel in the middle of the conversation.
Yeah.
Which I thought was kind of rude and sort of suspicious.
I assume the idea is like that's muting their half, but to me it seems like it would be essentially hanging up on the guy.
Yeah, but even if it is muting their half, it's a little bit like, what are you doing?
Right, because imagine you're on like a call on some app and somebody mutes their half of it, and you hear not just them get muted, but you hear like all the white noise of their room cut out, and it's like very obvious. And then like he would see Picard lean over to Troy to talk, and it's like,
yeah,
why are you hiding?
Yeah, it's unprofessional, and they're already pissing the guy off by interrupting his work. It doesn't paint the Federation in a great light to me, but whatever.
Having finished the episode, I don't understand his consternation in that scene, because
oh yeah, why he was all worried, because there was no reason for him to have been worried, right?
Yeah, exactly, because they established that he was more or less ignorant of the proceedings later on.
That's a great point. And that's another red herring, but it's a red herring that makes zero sense when you look back having watched the episode. So it's very clumsy, actually.
Right, like red herrings are fine. Subverting expectations is fine as long as you don't more or less lie to the audience. But then again,
Yeah.
this could just be another example of Troy not being very good at her job. She's like, he's hiding something, I know it. And he says not.
Yeah, it could be. I mean, we've seen plenty of that. We see that almost every episode, so...
Right.
Maybe it's canon, you know?
I would like to think so, but if Troy really was bad at her job, and that was canon, she would not be the queen of the chess set.
Right. Yeah, you're right. She wouldn't be.
So, unfortunately, that's more of just a theory.
She wouldn't be wielding her assault rifle in the BetaZed Wars or whatever.
The BetaZed Wars, never has a funnier phrase been spoken.
Yeah, never will be.
I like to imagine a BetaZed war of like them fighting each other just on front lines, and everybody's like hurling telepathic insults and such.
Well, yeah, they just have to be mean to each other.
Right. Fire when you see the blacks of their eyes. Anyway, you wanted to talk about the set.
I want to talk about the set, mostly just to gush about it because I really liked it. It was very it was another set, you know, as par for the course with season 1. It was another set that kind of reminded me of the original series. Had all those, you know, old looking computers. It had kind of a that kind of like color grading to it and all that. It was neat. That's all. I mean, it was nice.
It was. There's a lot of new physical props, new to the series at least. I mean, it looked kind of, I don't know, old fashioned because a lot of that stuff was. That lab, terraforming lab. Basically, all of it was sourced from different sci-fi productions from like the 70s.
That's right. Yeah.
Our prop master and the whole prop department did like an insanely thorough job getting all this stuff as a way to, as like a send off to a previous era of sci-fi that kind of with the advent of TNG was coming to an end. So there's things like one of the computer consoles was from Zardoz, I think, and the costumes were from Logan's Run, and like there's that big sphere that is supposed to be a representation of the planet that one of the characters moves around. That was from one of the Planet of the Apes movies. Like the laser cannon that kills the guy was from Star Crash. You could go on about every single prop that was there.
There's the ship model from The Last Starfighter.
Yes. And it's cool. It's like, it doesn't enhance the show for your average viewer, but when like real sci-fi fans, they see this love letter to the genre, it's like, it does a few things. A, it's just interesting and, you know, fun to see. B, it kind of gives Trek this credibility of like, yeah, we know what we're doing. We're paying the proper respects. And C, it's just a fun story to tell on your podcast.
Yeah, which is why we did it in the first place.
Right. Exactly.
No, but it was very cool, and I invite the audience to go rewatch that scene again, and see how much you can pick out.
Right.
Because it's filled to the brim.
You do need a keen eye, but if you're up for the task, you'll be rewarded. Yeah,
absolutely. Now
but I think the way that set looks very unfamiliar from other TNG sets, you know, contemporary sets, is it helps with that murder mystery atmosphere because you go in, you're kind of suspicious of everybody. There's shots of like characters standing behind other characters, like Geordi's at some console, and one of the terraforming station workers is like behind him in the shot, and Geordi can't see him, and he like, is this guy gonna come up on Geordi and attack him? And like he you know, he's the perpetrator. I don't know. Things feel unfamiliar and a little tense in the
Speaking
set.
of shots,
yeah.
Speaking of shots, I was just remembering your your reaction to certain close-ups in the last episode.
Oh yeah.
And I'm wondering if you had that issue this episode, because this was directed by Corey Allen, and he seemed to really love his close-ups.
I don't think so. I think it. Yes, it was the
Maybe
close-up,
you were
but
appropriate.
I think that too. But I think the type of lens used was different with the other close-ups, and the ones that I was talking about, and it kind of accentuated, kind of stretched some of their facial features. In this,
okay.
I did notice some camera movement that was pretty interesting in the direction of this episode. Like there's one shot on the bridge where like the camera pretty quickly swings around and like pulls back. That was pretty visually interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So with television directing, a lot of times it can just be kind of flat and sterile. You know, you see this with a lot of the episodes that Frakes directed, and other times it can be pronounced at very specific times where it adds a lot of flair. And in others it's invisible but functional. So with directing television, I don't think you need to really go, or really should go all out in making 40 minutes of visually interesting cinematography. I
don't think you really can most of the time.
Right, because how many?
Not that you can't, but it's kind of a tall order.
Because the sets are built to be filmed in a very specific way.
Yeah.
The bridge, for example, most of the time it's missing one of its walls. The set is.
Right.
So it kind of limits what you can do. But when you have those moments of like pretty heady direction, they stick out in your mind, and it's like, oh, this is pretty good. So did a good job.
Yeah. Sure. Yeah, and I was going to say, this episode feels quite a bit different from Encounter at Farpoint. And I mean that in a good way too. But I guess that's probably just the result of Farpoint having too many hands in the pot.
Right.
You had Delancey doing his thing, Gene doing his thing. So this may be the first episode that Alan directed that was actually in his own style.
And it paid off.
It did. In any case, going back to the set, I do want to discuss the juxtaposition of what is probably the worst actor in this episode against the best actor in this episode.
Well, the best actor in the series so far.
Well, yeah, you know what? You're probably not wrong. The woman explaining terraforming.
Right.
So, okay. She was Miss Hawaii, right? 10 years prior to this.
That wasn't her name. That was a title that she won.
It was a title. I've already forgotten her name, but it was something Hawaiian.
Right.
We did not hire her for her acting skills. I think that should be abundantly evident.
Yeah. If you've seen the episode, you'll know.
So what happened was Gene had a single piece of media that he kept recorded on tape, on hand, all the time. And that was the Fantasy Island episode that this woman appeared in 10 years prior to the Star Trek episode.
Right.
Gene had been obsessed with her since he saw it. So he's the one who personally wanted her. Now, unfortunately, I guess no one gave him the memo. But this episode aired in 1988. By that point, she'd already... How did Gene put it?
He hit the wall?
Hit the wall, yes. She'd already hit the wall. And so after he'd seen her, he spent most of his time during production just like moping and...
Right. Playing the tape.
Not doing anything. Yeah. He did. He played the tape a lot. And he actually stepped down from his head writer position after this episode. He was kind of really shell shocked by this.
Well, it's a sign of the changing times, right?
Yeah.
You can't cling to the past forever, and I think Gene was finally starting to realize that this was no longer the '60s. Star Trek was not the same as it was before. Hollywood was not the same as it was before. And Gene was not the kind of person to adapt and roll with the changes in the times.
Yeah, definitely not. It really just became so evident that his time was kind of up.
Right.
You
both in his career and his life.
And his life, yes, definitely. Now, Walter Gotell, on the other hand,
oh my God,
he was also suggested by Gene because Gene loved his performance in the only Bond film he had ever seen, which was Octopussy, of course.
Right.
Where he played the Soviet leader, or the KGB leader, right?
The Bond villain.
Yeah, he played the Bond villain. And I do have to say, he was great in this episode.
Oh my God, he was distractingly good, I would say. He starts acting, and
a good way to put it.
Yeah, I mean, I thought that, like I said, it might have been one of the best performances so far in the show. He was just really competent, and like you don't get that often. Not here.
No, not really. But he was a big film actor, so
right.
As big as Bond is, basically. So.
Right. So
but he was in films before this. In any case,
who would you take in the arena? Heads up, his performance, or what? I forget his name. The guy who was the mobster. What was that?
Elaine's father.
Yeah, Elaine's father.
Probably this guy.
Yeah, I think so too. Lawrence Tierney. That's his name.
Well, yes, Lawrence Tierney. That's it.
So I respect them both a lot as actors and artists, but Lawrence Tierney is kind of like it's almost like he's doing a bit. Like that's just his archetype that he plays. Whereas Walter is more of just an actor, right? He's not reprising some earlier role. He's just doing his job, and it's doing it really well.
Yeah, he clearly has a wide range,
Right. It's I'm glad we never went with that idea where all of the secondary characters would be played by John Delancey.
Yeah, that was being kicked around for a little bit, huh?
Right, because Q being omnipotent and such, like he could follow the Enterprise crew around and
right, and not only that, you could shapeshift, so you get a little bit of variety in there between Delancey scenes, and also it would have been so much easier to do any kind of reshoots we needed or whatever if we couldn't get Delancey because he could shapeshift.
Exactly. But
so there was a lot of stuff we could have done with that.
But at the same time, it would have robbed us of some good performances, and it would have. Well, I guess that's counterbalanced by the amount of performances it would have saved us from. But
yes. Miss Hawaii explaining terraforming for 5 minutes this episode
was so long.
It was grating. I wanted to pull my hair out. I wanted to leave the room, shut the TV off, anything.
Well, you remember the fight about that, right? It's having a 5-minute explanation on what terraforming is just plopped in the middle of the script. Right. We were okay doing that early on, at the beginning of the series, season 1, at the beginning of season 1 rather. Okay, we need to take some time to explain these scientific concepts to the audience so that they'll latch on to our show and follow with it. Primetime TV audiences are not the most intelligent, I would say, just statistically, in market research.
Mm-hmm.
But
for sure,
at this point, the writers are starting to push back on it. They're like, we can't. Our script will be so clunky. We want to do some more things. If we take all this time to explain what terraforming is, it's going to eat up a lot of valuable screen time. And Gene was kind of on the other side of that. He's like, no, audiences, they're not going to get it. They're not ready. We need to tell them. And it was a back and forth. And the only reason it got solved was kind of like happenstance. The director rolled up to the discussion that our head writer and Gene were having. And he kind of poked his head in and asked a question. He's like, do we really need to have a whole episode about tiger farming?
Tiger farming,
right?
Yep.
And Gene kind of just had this look on his face, like, you see, and it stayed in.
I mean, I guess for the best, because as we went on, we were reaffirmed at every turn that our audience was, not the smartest.
Right.
So it did tend to be the better idea to over-explain,
It's not like today where the only people who watch Star Trek are specifically seeking it out on Netflix, and that kind of selects for a certain type of individual. When you're on primetime television, you need every set of eyeballs that you can get. And, sometimes you do that by over-explaining the science, and sometimes you do that by having a ghost story in a Victorian mansion. You do what you got to do.
Yeah. And, so for you Zoomers out there, back in the day when you were watching TV, you didn't have a choice. You either watched Star Trek or you went to bed hungry,
And you couldn't fast forward the commercials.
Oh, no. But sometimes those were the best parts.
That's true. A lot of fond memories of different insurance sellers and their ad campaigns. Good times.
Great sponsors.
Great bumpers too. Do you remember the Cheers bumper that used to air right before we would come back from commercial?
Which one was that?
So that was the one where it was at Cheers, the bar, and Worf and Geordi kind of beam in, and there's Norm and Cliff like sitting at the bar,
right?
And they're like, they kind of look at the people as they beam in, like, "Oh, you want a drink?" And Worf pulls out his tricorder, and he's like, "What a strange synthahol! I'll have some."
Oh,
yeah. And it was a bit of cross promotion.
Yep, yeah, and everyone laughs, and yeah. Huh? That's right. Wow, I guess I memory hold that one.
Yeah, it's valuable. You're not going to get that on Netflix.
Yeah. Go look that up on YouTube. Our audience, of course.
Right.
Not you, Mitch.
I got a show to record.
So I want to talk about the murder scene.
Pretty gruesome. The sound effects, anyway.
Gruesome. The door jamming was interesting to me. How an electronic password operated panel could jam.
Well, I think the implication, and I don't know if this pans out, is that the entity, the life form, is controlling that.
Makes sense. I just found it kind of funny. Crusher walks in and says, from the look of his wounds, it's probably hopeless, despite, again, having brought a man back to life maybe 10 episodes ago.
Yeah, I love how everybody stands at the threshold of the door and they're like, let's not go in. Let's not beam him up remotely.
Right.
Let's just watch.
Not even trying. The episode calls for a death.
The characters must act helpless and do nothing.
Mm-hmm.
While the murder scene's happening, by the way, the sound effects that they chose. The man is like burned with lasers, but the sound effects are more like crunching or
yeah.
So when you're hearing that, you're like, oh my god, what the hell is happening to this guy? Is he gonna be just chopped up in different pieces or what? And then the door opens and he's just like burned.
I did not know what to expect when we got to the other side of that door,
which was pretty cool. I liked that. Again, that kind of gruesome moment was also caught me off guard and kind of contributed to the whole tone of the proceedings. But yeah, when somebody needs to die, any contrivance that you can think of will be necessary. Surprised they didn't have the tricorder killed him. You get it to do that too.
Well, that would be a reason to upgrade it then, wouldn't it?
That's true. Yeah, he's using the let me see that tricorder, and it explodes and kills him. And they're like, oh my god, when are we going to get those quadcorders in?
Oh, it's perfect.
So that's like the main thrust of the episode. I think it cuts to commercial there, and at that point, I'm like super invested in it. I'm really into it. Love that. And it plays that out for a little bit more before it kind of switches tracks to its other plot. There's a lot of suspicion that falls on the head of the research facility, the terraforming station, Walter, and I like that little like beating around the bush, where it's like, okay, he knows something, he's not telling us.
Mm-hmm.
We can't exactly just accuse him with nothing. Data, go do this investigation. Which was also neat, although Data like having like a boss fight was kind of strange. Where it's
oh yeah,
it's like a very video gamey scenario. I think like Data goes into this room and this laser activates, and he's like, jumping around the room dodging it, and then he has to just like destroy the damn thing. I don't know.
Yeah, it was a little silly.
It was kind of silly. I liked the shot of him like at the console where the laser starts like poking around behind him, and you see it like kind of take aim at him. Data being like in the direct center frame was an interesting choice of framing to me. Usually people like, they have their rule of thirds or whatever, and
right,
this kind of like directly violated that, intentionally of course, but I thought it looked good. I liked it.
I like the part where Picard yells, "Get him out of there!"
Yes,
he says he contacts Geordi, right, and he's like, "What's going on down there?" And then he screams, "Get him out of there!" referring to Data, just helplessly, like as if that's gonna do anything. Picard's role in this situation was very neutered.
Right. Well, I mean, it's further it's made more strange by the fact that once Geordi is like, I can't get him out of there, Picard's like, I'll just beam him up then. Like, why didn't you do that first?
Right. It was so confusing.
Right. Again, just contrivances for the.
It was a contrivance, yeah. Anyway, let's we can move away from that.
Well, before we move away from that, there's one very funny line of dialogue, one very funny exchange. So, at the onset of that, Geordi communicates with Picard, and he's like, "We have a problem," and Picard says, "Be specific." And it's just that exchange is hilarious to me.
Well, that was part of that entire exchange I was just talking about too.
Right,
like
right.
It's a wild 10 seconds or so. So what were they thinking? I have in my notes here actually that it was in this episode, I think, that I noticed that the lack of Worf being around in any meaningful capacity is starting to really get noticeable.
Well, the thing is that Worf, his meaningful contributions to the plot versus his screen time, one of those is now growing, and the other one is not. Because Worf has a lot of dialogue in this episode, relatively for Worf. So the one I wrote down was just cutting to Worf saying, "I cannot understand the patterns," and then it just cuts to somebody else to explain it. But what happened was that Michael Dorn, I mean, he's Worf. He noticed in the first like 17, 16 episodes, they didn't have a lot of dialogue, and he's like, "Oh, writers, please give me more dialogue." And writers, they never like being told what to write, so they're like, "All right, Michael, we'll give you dialogue." And then they gave Worf a bunch of stupid lines like that. And there's other ones in this episode that are just equally dumb, equally nothing. It's like, all right, Worf's talking now, didn't say anything substantial. Let's have another character follow up with the actual point of the scene.
Yeah, we are going to get a lot more of that too.
Poor Michael, man.
Yeah, I couldn't catch a break. Well, then he got insanely popular, so I guess all's well that ends well. But
his break will come once he starts dating Troy.
Of course. That's what we're really waiting for. So we get into this discovery. I do want to note that Wesley was once again standing in I guess what was the medical office or whatever.
Right.
as if he had any reason to be there analyzing this life form.
Well, he's just hanging out with his mom.
Maybe that is what he's doing, but doesn't he have like actual duties now that he's an ensign?
Isn't today Mother's Day? Have some
That's
fucking
it.
respect.
That's it. You're right. That's why he was there. Okay. My bad. I'm sorry.
He should be.
Moving on, though. Moving on. This is where we start to see that this episode really just has no conflict. Because, and here's the thing, when you move away from the murder mystery, okay, sure. But when you framed these characters, Mandel specifically, as someone who's clearly hiding something, and then the resolution to that is I wasn't hiding anything.
Right.
And I'm a morally upstanding person who has no problem with abandoning this project. It just falls completely flat.
I agree completely. It betrays all of the intrigue that was built up in the first half.
Like, it would be one thing for him to be the kind of guy who was like, who cares? We started this project. We have a job to do.
Right.
These life forms aren't anything that we know life is, so who cares about them? If he was one of those kinds of guys, if he was one of those kinds of guys, it would have been much better. Yeah. Much more of a real conflict to it.
It's like, all right, we'll throw you in the brig, and that's the conclusion. And it's like, great. It's very easy to solve that problem in the story, and you have a bit more of an ethical, moral conflict. There's an antagonist, and it also just gels with everything you established before.
Yeah, but no, instead we have to go with the Enterprise crew fighting a jar filled with a couple Christmas lights.
Well, you see they're growing. They're multiplying.
They are growing. They are growing to form a Microbrain.
Right.
Which coincidentally, or maybe not so coincidentally, was Rick Berman's nickname amongst the cast and crew.
Right. It was
a
bit of an homage.
Yeah. Microbrain. But yeah, they form a Microbrain and start wreaking havoc, like closing doors and turning off lights.
Yeah. I kind of I don't really buy the idea that there's a lot of hand waving to establish the fact that because these things multiply, they are like a computer. Which I don't really get. It's like, oh, well, in our cells, one cell can't really think, but you have a lot of cells, and then you start having brain function and the ability to think. And it's like,
well,
okay.
I mean, they're silicon-based, so
right, but it's like Dr. Crusher. We have millions and millions of cells in our body, and there's 6 of these things.
Well, did they ever say they were individual cells? Because I think if you can see them like that, they got to be more than one cell each, right?
Well, they don't have cells, right? They're inorganic, but
can you make a cell out of silicon theoretically?
I know you can make breasts out of silicon.
And that's the end of our podcast, folks.
So anyway, yeah, like, it's not that it's impossible, it's just that it felt hand wavy, like I said. Not a big deal, right. But I just didn't buy it completely, whereas some of the other scientific explanation is I can understand pretty easily, or rather, not like I can understand it because I know science, but as a viewer, it's easy for me to buy.
Yeah, I mean, I was thoroughly comfortable and convinced with everything that was going on in terms of the science here.
I liked some of the stuff, it's the sand and the water underneath of it, and over time, that makes this silicon, that makes sense. I like that.
And that's part of what makes this episode so cool is delving into the hard science like that, where Trek really never went.
Right. And choosing a terraforming station to be the source of conflict with a life form that's made in such a way, it's just a really cool idea.
Yes.
So I agree. I think a lot of that worked. And I don't think that the computer stuff didn't work, per se, just that I I kind of like tilted my head at it, like, yeah, okay, I guess.
Speaking of computers, you know what bothered me? When Crusher is talking to the computer
and she tells it to theorize? Yeah.
Yes.
I'm glad we're both on that. I wrote that in my notes.
Do these people even have real jobs at this point?
Computer, think for me.
It's ridiculous. It's like on its way to being sentient.
Right. It's... And then it like gives an answer. Life. Life.
Yeah, which it is definitely, that's not the definition of life by any stretch. So I don't know where the computer pulled that from.
Well, it was told to theorize, not be correct.
Maybe from the silicon-based life form that the original crew met. maybe that's the Enterprise records or something. Because I was sitting there through the whole episode thinking they've really never run into a non-carbon-based life form before, but they have. I mean,
the crystalline entity.
Oh yeah, and the crystal. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah. Yeah. There's no way that's carbon-based.
Right. So
come on.
Watch your own show. God.
I gotta say, we have to say it. The Microbrain is much better than the crystalline entity, though.
Nah. Hold on. Well, hold on. Let's stop.
Are you gonna sit there and think about it?
Well, no, I don't need to think about it. It's a thing. I disagree with this.
Are you serious?
Yeah, I am actually. So, part of the reason I liked the crystalline entity was that it was very unknowable, mysterious, difficult to communicate with, impossible to communicate with, till later episodes. And it seemed more like a force of nature, which is cool. It's mysterious, and that's interesting. And this silicon life form starts out that way, and then it starts communicating with them, and that's kind of the low point.
I can understand where you would take umbrage with it talking like a baby.
Yeah, and even putting my gripes with language aside, and those pop up here as they always do. The idea of it speaking at all just breaks down that entire wall of mystery that surrounds it, and establishes its motives exactly. It gives it a personality, which is like humanizing it in a way, which is also less interesting. And all of that just makes it just another Star Trek race. Like, they could have been communing with a Klingon at that point.
I don't think it's just another race. I mean, I think they needed to find some way to communicate with it, for the sake of the plot. And maybe they didn't. Maybe it wasn't the best way to do it, but I think, by virtue of it being ostensibly silicon-based, and having no real culture comparable to humans, Klingons, anything like that, I think just by that virtue it is different. I think it's interesting to try to communicate with things that are so different from what you understand to be life.
Well, here's the
yeah.
Well, they do that with the crystalline entity later on in the series, and it's really cool. Because they're like, okay,
we haven't gotten to that, Mitch.
I know, but the point is, you can do this in a way that's good. So when they get to the crystalline entity later on, they're like, oh, it's crystal vibrations. What if we send out vibrations at certain frequencies and and attempt to send a message that way? And they succeed.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah.
And if this episode, they could have been like, oh, it's flashing lights to try to communicate with us. What if we Data, decipher this pattern, and all right, Riker, you go in there with a flashlight and flash it back at them. Something. But
to clarify what I meant that this episode, the Microbrain in this episode is better utilized than the entity was in its episode before this.
Yeah, I can buy that. I like the idea of it kind of taking over the Enterprise, and yes, it being a computer and its ability to interface with the ship's computer is an interesting threat. Certainly.
but it really didn't do much with it.
Yeah, and they didn't need to have it call them ugly bags of mostly water.
Yeah, that was a little
ridiculous.
It was, like someone who likes Doctor Who a little too much would call people or something. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and actually, speaking of Doctor, it sounds just like a Dalek would, or Dalek, whatever. Those like little short round robots. I don't know. Okay. All right. Whoops. Anyway, so there's good and bad points to the representation of that race, that alien, but conceptually it's cool, and mostly it works. So I'm not gonna say it ruins the episode, because it doesn't. It does not.
Right. It's just things here and there fall a little flat, and I think that's kind of. I think the main sin of this episode is like what I said before, where the crew of the terraforming station become completely uninvolved about halfway through for no good reason.
There didn't need to be this clear divide of the two halves of this plot. It's not even an A plot or a B plot. It's because they don't run concurrently at all.
Right.
It just makes the beginning, which was very promising, disappointing, even if the end is in and of itself interesting.
Exactly. Yeah. And we have a weird, like, sentimental ending.
Yes.
That feels out of place. They return the entity, the Microbrain, to its planet, and then Picard says, "Perhaps we'll come back in 1,000 years when we're ready."
Well, the alien itself says, like, "We'll stop fighting, but don't come to our planet. You're not ready. You're still too primitive. Come back." And it literally says, "Come back in, I don't know, 300 years." Just...
Which I do have to stress, too, how ridiculous it is to hear something baby talk to you about how primitive you are.
Right. Yeah, it's kind of silly.
Really not convincing at all. It felt a little... And, not only that, but, like, cry about how little light it's getting when you are literally controlling the light. You're basically God to it, and it's telling you you're primitive?
How do we defeat this thing? Oh, turn off the lights. No, I'm powerless.
Wow, how advanced.
You would think it controlling the computer of the ship, it could control the lights.
You would think so, but no, you see the lab lights were outside the lab for some reason. So.
I like the sound effect when Riker's turning off the lights. It's like, it's like a powered down sound.
Right. And no, that line actually offended me.
Which one?
The you're too primitive.
Yes.
I legitimately felt offended by that. And and then we get like this saccharine, like, weird mushy ending about it. Like, Riker goes and looks at it for 30 seconds.
Right.
Just get a shot of him standing there staring at it.
Which is the same way he looked at Miss Hawaii when he went to visit her in her quarters. Character walking into the character's room.
And that didn't go. Yes. Oh my gosh, Mitch. I forgot to write that one down.
Really quick about that specific interaction.
We need to talk about this.
So she's like going on about terraforming, and at one point she says terraforming makes you feel godlike. And then it cuts to Riker like smiling fondly in reaction to that.
Right. I had it in my notes in all caps. What the fuck is this conversation? It was so bizarre, so out of place, so unneeded, and led nowhere. Riker didn't even do any.
They set it up that Riker, you think Riker's about to have sex with her. Like, that's how it's shot.
Right. Well, yeah, because Troy looks at him meaningfully, and she's like, maybe you'd have better luck.
Right.
Yeah.
That's just Riker's job, to go have sex with anybody they beam up. Right.
Well, it is. So, when he walks into that room, you think so. And then he's like, do you want to see it? The thing that destroyed your career? And she says no, and he gets up and walks out immediately.
That's like your final line in the episode.
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
there is some kind of curse with people walking into other people's rooms that makes these scenes just so ridiculous.
Well, if that's the thing, if it was a scene that was organic to the plot, it would not take place in somebody's quarters 99% of the time. So whenever this happens, you're largely just going to get a vestigial, extraneous conversation to the proceedings that doesn't mean anything.
Oh, man. What else was there?
I want to give a quick shout out to our I guess there's the other guy on the space station, but to our other guest actor in this episode. During the final act, when like they're trying to stop this entity on board, Riker's in engineering, and he shares a scene with an incredibly lovely woman.
Oh, Gertha!
Gertha, yes, we love Gertha.
We do love Gertha.
Now, yes, you probably noticed the same way you noticed about Miss Hawaii. Gertha's not an actress trained as one. She would just be on the set, not on the set, but on the lot. She'd sit by security and just kind of hand out baked goods to people who came by. Very lovely woman. I think it was her hobby, but I think everybody who worked at Paramount not only knew Gertha, but had quite a fondness for her. She was like the lot mascot. So, we were like, Gertha, you want to be on Star Trek? You want to have a speaking role? And she's like, sure, I'll do that. My kids will enjoy this. And she did. And she's adorable. We love her. Gertha, you're the best.
The best, yeah.
I want to give her a shout out, though, because right now, Gertha's kids are running a GoFundMe for her. She's a little bit at risk of getting kicked out of her assisted living home. And, at this point, she just kind of lays in bed all day, but she deserves a place to do that in a dignified way and have a dignified end to her life. So I'll see if I can put the link somewhere in the description, but Trek fans, let's do it. Let's make Gertha's life comfortable before she's beamed up for good. So I know we can do it.
Yeah. And we have great fans. Just amazing people. I know this is going to be a huge success, and we really, really, really love Gertha. So if we can do anything for her, we appreciate the help.
Yeah, and I think that once you make such a contribution to Trek, it's just unfair for your life to end in any way but the most comfort.
Absolutely, yeah.
Final thoughts on this episode?
Final thoughts. Well, it's like we said, I think it's a great concept. It loses its footing here and there, but it is an episode I would rewatch, I think. Same. And I would recommend people to watch it.
Yeah, this despite the first half and the second half not connecting as well as I would like, it's still quite good, and you got a great performance in there, some intriguing ideas. And a tone, I guess if you've watched this episode, heard us talk about it, the tone of the first half is not going to hit the same way because you kind of know where it's going. But still worth a watch. Very, very, very good, especially by season 1 standards. But this episode would not be out of place in a later, better season of TNG.
Mm-hmm. Just done slightly better.
Right.
Of course. Yeah. All right, trivia time.
I'm ready. I'm so excited for this.
All right, we got a multiple choice question today.
Well, my chances of getting it right have just gone up exponentially.
Yeah. All right. So, silicon life forms.
Yes.
Of these 5 silicon life forms, which one is one that has not appeared in Star Trek?
Okay.
We have a Tholian, a Dewlap,
oh jeez,
a crystal dog, a crystal dragon,
oh god,
and an Excalibur.
Oh Jesus, they somehow got more ridiculous in sequence. Just the names. So There's a Dewlap, an Excalibur, a Crystal Dog, a Crystal Dragon. What was the first one? A
Tholian.
Tholian. Okay.
Yep.
So I don't think that you would have Crystal Dog and Crystal Dragon as an answer if only one of them was correct. If only one of them had appeared. I'm imagining.
Wait. Did I ask the question right? It's which one has not appeared, right?
Yeah. That's what I mean.
Okay.
So I'm imagining some scenario where somebody has like a crystal menagerie, and he's like, "This is my crystal dog, and this is my crystal dragon. These are my gentlemen suitors." So I think that those two would go together, and I'm gonna stop thinking about them, which leaves the other three. There's a Dewlap, a Tholmir?
Tholian. Yep, Tholian.
Tholian, and what the hell? It was Excelsior. No.
Excalibur.
Excalibur. Okay. So Excalibur obviously has like Excalibur going on. So if there's like some kind of sword life form, it would probably be called that. Now I'm having trouble envisioning like what a sword life form would look like, but that seems like a cogent enough idea that somebody might reasonably make that I'm gonna assume that actually exists in Star Trek, which leaves Dewlap and Tholian. God damn it, Tholian. Now, Dewlap as a name sounds just too dumb to be real. Now, I'm setting myself up for failure here. I know. But I'm going to assume that it's Dewlap because I can't really put an image to what that even might be. So I'm going to say Dewlap.
Well, this is actually going to be interesting because Dewlap does exist. It's the Excalibur that was wrong.
No!
The Dewlap, it says Borg species 912. I believe it appeared in a novel, so I don't know if we have any images of that. But yes, the Dewlap does exist. I'm sorry to say.
Damn. So where did you get the name Excalibur? Did you make that?
It's a bastardized version of Excalibien.
Oh, what's that?
I don't know.
Is that another sword-wielding species? Does this have to do with Excalibur at all?
No, actually.
Damn.
They come from Excalibia.
I'm sure they do. So what are the Crystal Dog and Dragon from?
I don't know. Those are red links. So the Excalibians are rock monsters.
I see, like the B-52 song.
Yeah. Pretty much. I guess they appeared in some TOS comic series or something.
And what is Tholmir?
Tholian?
Tholian?
Those are those are from the original series episode, The Tholian Web.
Are they just humans with a weird piece of makeup on their face?
No, they're these like weird. They're non-humanoid. They're these red like bug-looking things.
Huh. I guess you learn something every day.
Yeah.
Well, I didn't get it this time, but I will probably not get it next time. So,
probably.
If you're interested in seeing the conclusion of my ongoing battle against useless trivia, then be sure to join us next time. And until then, everybody, please stay readier.
The troublesome little man-child.
Consider that in the history of many worlds, there have always been disposable creatures.
Do you consider yourself superior to us?
Should have told him to mind his own damn business.
But I stroked the beard thusly. Do I not appear more intellectual?
Not a promising beginning.